Aside from the recent TLC event, WWE has had to change their lineup on short notice before. With the recent viral outbreak affecting several of WWE's top stars, the company was scrambling at the last minute to present an acceptable match card for their TLC pay-per-view. AJ Styles was called upon to substitute for Bray Wyatt in a match against Finn Balor and, in even more of a shocker, Kurt Angle replaced Roman Reigns for the main event in Angle's first WWE match in over 11 years. These changes are likely to make TLC 2017 remembered as having some of the biggest last-minute changes to a pay-per-view card in WWE history. Although it may have been the most event recently to feature such late-breaking changes, it wasn't the first. In fact, several WWE pay-per-views underwent shakeups to their lineup at the 11th hour. Would these 5 have the most impact? Number 5, Survivor Series 1989. Several of the earlier Survivor Series events underwent numerous changes at the last minute. It was almost as if the November tradition was cursed, and this was years before the Montreal Screwjob. The first time the card had a last-minute replacement was in 1989, in the main event nonetheless. The team of the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Neidhart, and the Rockers were scheduled to face the Heenan family's assembly of Andre the Giant, Haku, Arnold Anderson, and Tully Blanchard. By the time the final match on the card took place, Bobby the Brain Heenan had replaced Blanchard in the main event since Tully was no longer with the promotion. The substitution was explained as dissension amongst the Heenan family, but in reality, Blanchard was released due to a failed drug test. It was rare to see the Brain climb back into the ring for an actual match, so the decision to replace one half of the Brain Busters with the Brain himself was seen as an acceptable one for the Survivor Series audience. Aside from the recent TLC event, WWE has had to change their lineup on short notice before. Number 4, Survivor Series 1993. 4 years later, the first match of Survivor Series 93 saw Randy Savage make an unscheduled appearance, replacing Mr. Perfect on Razor Ramon's team. It was a strange coincidence considering the events surrounding the prior year's Survivor Series, but more on that later. The biggest change, however, came in what was to be the culmination of the long-running Jerry Lawler vs. Bret Hart feud. The plan was for Bret and his brothers, Owen, Keith, and Bruce, to battle Jerry Lawler and his Knights. At the event, however, Shawn Michaels replaced the King due to unexpected legal troubles that impacted Lawler at the time of the show. The charges were eventually dropped. While the change made little sense in kayfabe with no explanation given for Lawler's absence, it was a nice callback to the 1992 Survivor Series, which featured Shawn vs. Bret in the main event. It was also Shawn's return to WWE after a 3-month suspension, so the situation wasn't a total loss. Aside from the recent TLC event, WWE has had to change their lineup on short notice before. Number 3, Vengeance Night of Champions, June 2007. When wrestling fans think of the weekend of June 24, 2007, the unforgivable actions of Chris Benoit come to mind. These actions were so horrific that everything else about that weekend in the wrestling world took a major backseat. One of those details was that a world title match on WWE's Vengeance card was forced to be changed on the fly. At Vengeance Night of Champions, Chris Benoit was booked to wrestle CM Punk for the vacant ECW Championship. When Benoit no-showed the pay-per-view, WWE scrambled to salvage the ECW title match. In Benoit's place, the company inserted Johnny Nitro, also known as John Morrison, who defeated Punk to win the ECW Championship. It defied Vince McMahon's typical booking pattern that if a talent no-shows or a match has to be changed for any reason with little to no notice, the babyface goes over 99% of the time. This was the example of that 1%. Aside from the recent TLC event, WWE has had to change their lineup on short notice before. Number 2, Bad Blood in Your House. October 1997. Recently celebrating its 20th birthday, Bad Blood in Your House is remembered for many notable reasons. Not the least of which was the announcement of the untimely passing of Brian Pillman during the event's preview show, The Free for All. The day of the event, Pillman was found dead in his hotel room, having suffered from what was later revealed to be a heart attack. This was the first time that anything like this had ever happened to a current performer and major star on the WWE roster. At In Your House, Pillman was slated to wrestle Dudlov in what was to be one of the show's feature bouts. Instead, WWE quickly added 2 unscheduled matches to the card: Max Mini and Nova vs Tarantula and Mosaic, and the Disciples of Apocalypse vs Los Boricuas. Neither contest was anything spectacular, but given the tragic events of the day, they were simply oughta.